Buenos días a todas, todos y todes. Estamos muy felices de dar inicio al primer panel de muchos del sexto encuentro internacional de la industria documental latinoamericana Conecta. En estos paneles podremos conocer distintas experiencias y actualizarnos en los temas importantes que están cruzando hoy día al documental. Les recuerdo que nuestros paneles comienzan hoy día a las 10 de la mañana, tenemos otros a las 3 de la tarde y estarán todos los días de aquí hasta el viernes y después la próxima semana los lunes y martes. Hoy le damos el inicio a esta serie de paneles con el panel titulado The Guardian, una ventana impulsora para cortometrajes documentales de la era actual. The Guardian es un prestigioso medio inglés que cuenta en su versión online con un espacio de producción y difusión de cortometrajes documentales que hablan de temáticas actuales y creativas a través de relatos cortos. Encargan y seleccionan potentes cortometrajes con personajes de todo el mundo para su audiencia digital global. Ahora vamos a ver un pequeño clip con algunas imágenes de las producciones que ellos han realizado. Bueno, y estamos muy felices de darle también la cordial bienvenida a nuestras grandes invitadas de esta mañana. Están por una parte con nosotros Ekaterina Ochagavia, de Guardian. Ella ha trabajado como directora y editora de Guardian durante más de una década, creando una cartera de trabajos aclamados por la crítica, que van desde series interactivas hasta documentales puntuales, especializada en la narración de historias internacionales sobre derechos humanos, derechos de la mujer y el medio ambiente. Muchas gracias por contar contigo esta mañana, Katia. Y bueno, también estamos junto a nuestra querida moderadora, Rosemarie Lerner, una gran amiga nuestra. Ella es directora y productora peruana con maestrías en cine documental e industrias culturales de 𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐻 University, codirectora del reconocido documental interactivo Proyecto 𝐏𝐴𝐵𝐻, y es fundadora de la productora Lúcida Media, donde explora la intersección del documental y los medios emergentes. Rosemarie también se encuentra participando en Conecta con su nuevo proyecto Mapa Costa a Costa. Bienvenidas a las dos. Lamentablemente no podemos encontrarnos hoy día con Lindsay Poulton, no nos podrá acompañar porque surgieron unos inconvenientes a última hora, pero ella también podrá estar con nosotros en los próximos días en las reuniones que tendrá con algunos proyectos. También les aprovecho de contar que este panel cuenta con traducción simultánea. Pueden abajito del Zoom ver ahí que dice un mundito interpretación, ahí pueden elegir el idioma si es en español o en inglés. Y también les damos la bienvenida y las gracias a nuestros compañeros que nos estarán ahí transmitiendo también el panel con lengua de señas, y estaremos junto a Vicente Becerra y a Felipe Zapata. Muchas gracias a todos por estar en este momento. Y por último decirle que vamos a iniciar la conversación, pero pueden ir dejando sus preguntas o reflexiones en el chat, las cuales al final del panel Rosemarie le va a ir contestando y dando curso para que ahí puedan seguir dialogando y despejar todas las dudas que tengan. Así que nada, queridas, muy bienvenidas, de verdad estamos muy contentas con el inicio de este panel, también estamos muy contentas por contar con ustedes y también con The Guardian, que es la primera vez que se une a nuestro evento y esperamos que sea la primera de muchas otras en el futuro. Así que muchas gracias, que tengan todos una gran mañana y las dejo para que inicien ahí la conversación.
Gracias, Paula.
Gracias, Paola. Bueno, saludos a todos, todas, todos. Es un placer y un honor estar acá y formar parte de Conecta, tanto como panelista como documentalista. Y ahora, bueno, es un honor poder conversar con Katia sobre el trabajo de The Guardian. Ahora voy a cambiar a inglés, la conversación va a ser en inglés, pero ustedes pueden seguir la traducción simultánea durante todo el tiempo. So now I'm going straight to switch to English and straight to the conversation. Katia First of all, it's so nice to meet you, and congratulations for your work and the work of The Guardian. I'm going to go straight and ask the first question, which I think is what most filmmakers here want to know, is what kind of stories do you think The Guardian is looking for? And what would you say makes a Guardian documentary, and what are you interested in?
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here. Hablo castellano también, pero no voy a hablar en castellano ahora porque creo que mi vocabulario es un poco limitada. Así que I will speak in English, but maybe afterwards we can do like questions in castellano. Igual. Yeah, so I think that the key point of importance for every documentary that we do really is the story. We always look for a really strong story arc. Obviously, there are lots and lots of different styles of documentaries. And I think for The Guardian, as primarily a news website, it's important for us to feel contemporary and relevant to people's lives, what's happening around them. We like to sort of provide a window into the world, a world that isn't necessarily your own. So we give a voice to people that we think stories should be covered, but perhaps aren't being in the widestream media.
That's great, and because I think The Guardian is a platform where we can see stories from around the world, and also that it's a great window for emerging talent and new voices of filmmakers worldwide, which is great. And I was wondering, how do the films, if they do, relate to the editorial position of The Guardian as a news company, as a media company, right? Because The Guardian has a very established position, I guess, as a very liberal media, very important media in the world. So do the films have to relate to this editorial position or not, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so we do have, obviously we have an editorial standard and an editorial guideline that we adhere to. I think perhaps that's something that you develop an understanding of in depth over time working at The Guardian. So as Paula said before, I've worked at The Guardian in lots of different roles for over 10 years now. So the main role that I've done there has been as a shooting, directing editor. So I've been the one going off, like, you know, pitching ideas, which is what a lot of story makers do to us now. But I've also been that person pitching ideas to my editor and saying, I think that this is important. This is how it relates to Guardian journalism, in my opinion, and doing a bit of a convincing exercise, because I think that it's not necessarily that we would only do documentaries that are our position in terms of liberalism or whatever, but obviously they tend to be those films that get pitched to us because people who think, oh, I'd like my film to be on The Guardian, you know, there might be some reasons for that. An example is a recent film we did called Saint Making, which is about the canonization or the making of Derek Jarman, who's an artist, into a saint, not a real one, but by gay nuns. So it's quite an interesting revisiting of queer history in the UK specifically. But obviously with that story, when it was pitched to us, it was clear to me that the editorial lines were coherent with The Guardian. And I think that that is really the key. We don't, when people say, you know, as you said before, the main question we would get from filmmakers is, what story are you looking for? And there really is just no answer to that question, unfortunately, which makes life much harder, especially for filmmakers. But what we're really looking for is unique insights into unique worlds. Something perhaps you didn't know, something you didn't know you wanted to know about, but then when you see a trailer or you see something on the website, you think, oh, I really want to click on that. So what we're looking for is that appeal. And I think that you always have to keep a sort of sensibility in the background. of what the Guardian represents, our core values. You know, we do a lot of human rights stories, we do a lot of women's rights, environmentalism, things like that, and that makes sense to us. But if somebody pitched an idea that was outside of our sort of echo chamber, I suppose, I don't think we would automatically say no. It would be something to investigate out of interest, because I think that something important to recognize as well within news media organizations, within filmmaking, within our social circles with friends and family, is that that echo chamber is real. And especially as we look back at certain events in recent history, political and other, you know, sometimes things that are quite shocking to you happen and you suddenly go, oh my God, do loads of people think a completely different way? I thought everybody thought the same way as me. Brexit is a good example for me. I was like, wow, never. And then, you know, it happens.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, that we are like lately so used to just like you say, our echo chambers, or only like being surrounded because of the digital world and social media, only see the things that we agree with, right? But yeah, I also at the same time understand that as a filmmaker, you need to know the position or editorial, or what the company you are pitching for represents, and what the values are, and why you are a good fit for that space.
I would also just add that if if you are going to cover a story that's about something controversial, for example, you can position yourself in a neutral space, and you can still create a documentary about something even if you don't agree with it. If you position yourself and you position the viewer in a neutral standpoint where they can make their own conclusions, which is what we should be doing anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say have been in your experience, the most successful stories that you have produced with the Guardian documentaries? What some of the most successful ones?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because I think, for filmmakers specifically, the question of success is a real tricky one, because views doesn't necessarily equate to success, I think, in my opinion. I would say that we've had some films that have done huge numbers, like in the millions, which has been brilliant. But then there are other films that I think the integrity has been so strong that even though it may not have found a really wide audience, it's felt like a really strong offering to me. Yeah, we've had all sorts of different films because we're quite free to cover, anything really. As long as we can see that there's some sort of connection to contemporary life, I suppose. We've done all sorts of things. Yeah, I think that something recently that had a good impact and seemed to have a lot of coverage and was shared really widely was a film we did called R.I.P. 𝐏𝐚𝐽𝐜, which was it was about a man who had been killed in a mental institution in the UK. And it was questioning the role of the police with relation to young Black men and mental health. And I think that was really successful because there was real life impact of that story. It was covering an issue that exists, that impacts a lot of people, whether they are young Black men or whether they are allies of young Black men. It affects a lot of people, and it went far. And we also had something going through our UK Parliament at the same time, 𝐏𝐴𝐛𝐼's Law. So it coincided, our launch, with that. And I think that it really grew traction because of that. It's not a film that did huge numbers, but I think that the impact was very real. And we're still showing the film at film festivals, where it's getting a really good review. We're doing lots of Q&As, and people have asked to screen that film in lots of unusual locations for the film circuit. So in some of the psychiatric hospitals, for example, they want to do screenings with friends and family of the hospitals. because it's a really eye-opening and interesting debate that's discussed. So I think that that's a good example of a different type of success, I suppose.
I think that's really interesting what you say about the different kinds of success, because definitely I completely agree that for some people, maybe success will be the amount of clicks or views that a film gets. And maybe for a kind of film, that's success. Then you have success, like the most like meaningful, which is this impact related, when actually, and I think for documentary makers, that's many times the most important task for us as creators, is that it has an impact in the real world. And then there's this other kind of success, which I think The Guardian has also had, which is the critically acclaimed documentaries that you have produced, right?
Yeah.
Like you have Oscar Academy Award nominees and a winner this year, the Academy Award winner for documentary short, Colette, right?
Yeah. So that's obviously a good success. I should have mentioned that. But
it's a different kind of film, because they're very different in style. And I think that's kind of one of the also positive things about The Guardian, is that it produces a very diverse set of films. And I was wondering, at what stage, for example, do you get involved in the films, or does it vary depending on the different films? But usually, when do you prefer filmmakers to approach you with the projects, or do you approach the filmmakers? How that does work usually?
Yeah, so usually, and I should just say, yeah, obviously, sorry, in talking about success, I think that winning an Oscar is an amazing, massive feat. So I sorry, I didn't mention that, but that is great. I just also think that if you just strive to win Oscars, you're kind of losing the right purpose, I think, in a way, for our department anyway, especially as part of a news organization where we do really groundbreaking journalism daily. So I think as much as winning an Oscar is an incredible feat, we're surrounded by extremely successful like journalists and photographers and people who are winning lots of awards. So it's important to recognize those accolades, but also a good story is a good story wherever it comes from, you know. So in response to your second question, sorry, usually we like to get on board with projects quite early in the process, because we are very editorially conscious, and we have certain sensitivities of how we might like to approach certain things. We do prefer, as a team, I'm not sure if this was mentioned before, but the inner workings of our team at The Guardian, it's just 2 people. So there's the head of documentaries, and then there's the executive producer for documentaries. Currently, I am that role, but I've been covering somebody who's been off on maternity leave, who's just coming back now. So we're sort of both doing that role as I continue to hold on to the projects that I've commissioned while I've been doing it. But yeah, so it's a very small team, a maximum of 3 people. And so we like to really have a good grasp of what our filmmakers are doing. We like to be very in touch. We like to check in, and like we're always available for catch-ups, or, you know, as we all know, when things start going wrong, or suddenly you're like, oh my God, what if this is fallen through, or the weather's gone crazy, or COVID, or whatever. We're very available to talk through stuff. And we really like the opportunity to get to know our filmmakers first and foremost, and help nurture their talent, and use our experience to help them as well. If, you know, often they're more experienced than us, but sometimes it's the other way around. So we really like to do a sort of frisson, get a nice relationship going with our filmmakers, where if we're involved early on in the process, we can help form the idea and give our input on what we think does and doesn't work from experience, or from having seen how other things have played out on our website and stuff like that. So when people pitch us finished films, the sort of mentality, I think, for me anyway, is that the decisions have already been made. So I can judge those decisions as made and give feedback and say if I think that it feels relevant for our platform or not. But it's a lot harder to reach that point where it does feel relevant, because there might be small things that, you know, editorial nuances of The Guardian that people just don't know, and rightly so, they don't know about, that could hinder an acquisition. We do acquisitions, but very, very rarely. So I think, yeah, in answer to your question, it's early on and we like to get involved and collaborate. I think that's really the key. I'm not sure if Rosemarie has paused. ¿Está parada, Rosemarie? Es que no escucho nada, pero no sé si soy yo igual. Hola. Estás en mute.
Sorry. So sorry. I had
Perdimos la conexión, ¿verdad? Sí, sí.
Yeah.
No pasa nada.
So sorry. So going back, sorry for the interruption, but you were saying that, so you like to be involved since early in the process because there's a lot of nuances, and also you can help filmmakers with your experience. So that would mean that it's very rare that you do acquisitions of already finished work, or that ever happen or not.
Yeah, it's rare. It happens, but it is rare. And I think that it's becoming more and more rare as we have more of a clear voice as Guardian documentaries. And because it's a young department, it's not been around forever. The Guardian's 200 years old, and the documentary section has existed for like 6 years or something, 8 years, something like that. So it's really the baby of the family. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really amazing and really impressive that it has only been around for 5-6 years, and already you've become like one of the most like respected documentary brands in the industry. I think it has a very clear like editorial line also, like a Guardian doc, you know, it's a good documentary. So that's amazing. And I think you can feel also your involvement. I personally, we had a short film that we released with you, with The Guardian, on 2017 called 𝐏𝐴𝐿𝐴 Calls for Justice. Mm-hmm. And also our experience, personally, it was with Charlie Phillips back then, but it was similar as what you said. We like had support throughout the way, and I think that really helped us as really new filmmakers in the industry to create a better film, right? But my next question would be, how long does your involvement in the films, like for example, last, are you involved also in the distribution and outside of the Guardian platform? How does it usually work with the films that you commission?
Yeah, so obviously we get involved in the films as early as possible. And sometimes the production time can take, you know, years, even months, years. It can take a really long time. And sometimes I think one of the privileges of working at The Guardian specifically is that we have this freedom to let people take their time. Unlike most of the news, it's sort of a contradiction because it's a newspaper fundamentally. So we are a news website fundamentally, which is like quick turnaround, like get it out 1 minute after it happens. But we, in documentaries, we can afford a quite different culture in that sense, where we really like focus on contemporary stories. And as long as they feel relevant, they can continue. You know, you can't force, obviously we all know you can't force events to happen. So sometimes filmmakers pitch an idea around an event or a thing happening, and it doesn't happen, or it gets pushed back, or it gets pushed back again. Especially with COVID, I think we're all feeling that this is something we've probably experienced somewhere along the way. You have the plans and then it all goes mad and you have to wait. Yeah, so we get this nice in-between space where we can afford the chance to wait and stories do still feel relevant. I think that that's a really nice thing. I'm sorry, I can't remember the second part of your question.
And in terms of the distribution of the films,
oh, yeah.
After a film is released on the Guardian platform, how involved are you in the distribution? For example, in the, like you were speaking about this other film that is doing really well in festivals. How involved are you in that part of the process?
Yeah, so most of my answers, I'm really sorry, are like, it depends, because it really does depend on the filmmaker, what they want. Some people have their heart set on, you know, pursuing an Oscar run, and that's what they do, and they get a festival specialist to come and help them target every single festival. And blah, blah, blah. That is dependent on the filmmaker themselves, really. We definitely help. We do, as much as our financial contribution to projects, we also do what we call a contribution in kind. I'm not sure what that phrase is in Spanish, but we have teams of people who work at the Guardian, who work in marketing, who work in social media, who are specialized in certain elements of getting our story out there, who we always get on board and we say, hey, we've got this brilliant film coming out. I'm actually launching a film tomorrow. So I've been having these conversations today with our social team. Hey, we're getting a trailer together. Can you share it? Yeah, for sure. Those kind of chats, and those contributions all help promote the film at the end of the day. Yeah, so I think that we enjoy this quite wide group of people who we can tap into their knowledge and understanding of certain markets and stuff. We have a team who do handle distribution if the filmmaker wants that, and usually we split the revenue from that 50-50, but that also is dependent on what the filmmaker requires or specifically asks for. Some people say that they want to do it themselves, and that's fine. So it really depends. It's a case-by-case question, but we try to help if we can. And we also do help with festival promotion, and IDFA just happened. We had a film in there, but we had submitted quite a few other films as well, and we'd encouraged our filmmakers to submit with rough cuts and final rough cuts, just because I think that it's really good to get stuff out there. And another issue that filmmakers face is confidence. You know, a lot of people don't really know what the norm is, but that's kind of because there is not a set normal. There's not something across the industry that is just, that's the way it is and that's how it goes. And that's hard to navigate, honestly, especially internationally. So yeah, I think that one of our main objectives when it comes to, we've taken delivery of the film, is helping to build that confidence with filmmakers and helping them say, hey, yeah, I can be in that film festival, I'm going to apply, and taking opportunities that might arise to speak on panels or, you know, do Q&As at cinemas or online or whatever, and get the story out. You know, for us, usually we take ideas because the story is that good that we think, oh my God, this has to be out in the world. So that continues after the film's made.
Okay, that's amazing, and you're right. Like having like the whole Guardian like institution backing you up is a huge like benefit, and all this in-kind support. I think it makes a huge difference for emerging filmmakers who don't have like a big institution supporting them, or just going to a festival, having the Guardian name behind you makes you a lot more confident as an emerging filmmaker, I think. So definitely. And you mentioned something that it was actually related with my next question, which is about the funding and the budget that you have available for films. Also, I don't know if probably this is also depending and varies depending on the project, but is there a roughly amount that you invest in the short films, or how does it work usually?
Yeah, so we have a sort of general budget parameter, I suppose. we don't ever fund anything that's like huge amounts of money. So we're not, you know, like TV broadcasters who might have £100,000 to invest. We don't have that kind of money at all. But what we do have is a lot of connections to funding groups or festivals or whatever, places where filmmakers can seek funding, and we always really encourage people to seek alternative funding as well. Our sort of ballpark figure is like around £10,000 usually, but that does vary wildly according to lots of different factors. It's a bit like all my other answers, which are like, it depends. It really depends on the story. It depends on if we can have buy-in from other places within the Guardian, that's actually quite an interesting sort of element, that certain stories have certain funding within the Guardian. So sometimes we can approach separate, if you think of it like pots of money, we can approach someone who has a separate pot of money to our pot of money and say, hey, we've got this story about this that's relevant for your specific beat or your specific interest point. How about you invest that and we'll invest this, and then we can get the film going. So, and then maybe there's an opportunity there to also commission an article, an opinion piece, or a written interview, something like that. Yeah, so for those reasons, there's just lots of fluctuation, I would say. Yeah, so, but it's not a huge amount. It's, you know, it's less than huge.
But it's interesting to know about the flexibility also within the Guardian organization, and knowing that some project can expand if it's interesting for other parts of the Guardian. Maybe it can expand like to an article or an interactive project, which I think you have some like VR projects that also have a short film, like Victoria Maplebeck, The Waiting Room, right? You have both projects which are part of the same.
Exactly.
So that's interesting.
Another thing, maybe this is like relevant to what you're saying, is that we do sometimes commission short, because we only work in the short documentary space. So we only do the sort of 15 to like 30-minute sort of thing. I guess the 20-minute mark is just about like what we're sort of after usually. But what we have had quite a lot of experience in discussing with filmmakers more recently is if they're pursuing a long form film, taking into consideration a complementary offering. So it's not just a short version of the same film, it's a sort of tangent film that is a short offshoot. So maybe it's the same character, but it's a different part of the story, or maybe it's a character who didn't make it into the long form film. So I think that from a filmmaker's perspective, that's quite interesting to know, because, you know, we're all always looking for like extra funding here and extra funding there, and like, how can we make this work? Unfortunately, like documentary filmmaking is very much about that, like going and seeking and trying to find and being really resourceful and going, oh, well, I take that from here and this from there and that from there. So I think that that's part of it, which could be quite interesting for people who are trying to pursue that longer form space. And then, you know, you use that money to partially fund this and it partially funds the other. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess also because the fact that it's a short, but also the fact that it's online, it can even help you start building an audience for your long form documentary eventually, and or testing like if the story or the idea, the characters are actually like working. And I wanted to ask in terms of the rights, how much of the rights usually does the Guardian keep? How does that work? If you become involved in a production in an early stage, what's usually the deal you have with filmmakers?
Yeah, so guess what? It's another one, the same answer, so it depends really. But the preference is that we would take the rights. But I mean, the thing is, I think that with all filmmaking, it's really about like forming a relationship with whoever is commissioning you and being really honest about what you want. I think that some people approach us and think, oh, well, you obviously want all the rights, so I don't want to do this project because you want all the rights. And actually, that's not really how it works. I think that the more realistic model is that people say, this is my ideal. What is your ideal? And how do we meet in the middle somewhere? Yeah, and it gets complicated when there's like different people funding the same project and like where the rights might land in that. But it really does depend on the project. And luckily for me, because it's so confusing and it's really usually quite complicated, luckily for me, we have somebody who specifically deals with that. So usually when we're looking for commissions and trying to seek out partnerships with filmmakers, or we're finding projects or being approached with projects that we really like, the first part of the conversation is, you know, we like the idea, like, tell us more about this. Has it really got legs? Could this really work? What's the narrative arc? How is this relevant to people? You know, what are we learning from this? All of that stuff. Then we talk about budgets and see how realistic that is. And then when we get to the part of rights, we can sort of hand it off to someone else. Because I suppose for me, I prefer that model because I would rather stay more in tune with the editorial lines rather than the more complicated and like messy bits that are, you know, rights and all the contracts and all of that. I sort of am scared of those things, so I just hide.
Personally, I'm the same. I'm a lot more about the story content, and those things are not what I'm passionate about. But I guess it's definitely important for some producers to know how usually that works.
Yeah.
But also, and then another question that I think probably will have multiple answers as well is how would be the official most common maybe ways that filmmakers approach you with a story, or is it you wait for filmmakers to approach you with stories in an early stage, or do you, I think you mentioned you also sometimes look for stories and look to commission, and I guess probably during COVID or something, I don't know, that happened, or when you have like a specific topic you want to explore, what's usually the most common situations for you to commission a film?
Yeah, so I would say there's like 3 main ways that films kind of make their way to our inboxes. One is just, so we have actually got a pitching document on our Guardian website, where it asks you the key questions about really just basic info that we need as commissioning editors to be like, right, what's the title? Like, what is this about? Have they got any links to anything like visual material that's relevant, or character samples? What's their budget thinking? All the basics, basically. We have a form that you can just fill in online, and then you press send, and then it comes to my inbox. So I have a system of like going through all of those, but we get a lot of pitches, a lot. So sometimes it's a bit like crazy, the quantity coming in, especially when people are quite limited with how much they can actually get out and film. It gives people a bit of a backseat to be like, right, oh, I need to develop that film I was thinking about. I'll just send it in. So mid-COVID lockdown in the UK was like crazy. We would like thousands and thousands of proposals. But we go through all of those and we try to make a point to reply to every single one. Even if it's negative feedback, just to be like, or not negative feedback, but even if the response is, sorry, we don't want to take this, we try to respond to everybody, because I think it's a lot more dignified to do that. And I guess as someone who is like a filmmaker as well, it's just nice for someone to go, you know, thank you, but it doesn't quite fit, or like, thanks, but it's not, you know, it's not timely enough, or thanks, but the budget's way too high, or something, you know, so you have at least a reason and you can go off and develop it in more detail. But so that's one way. Another way is just we are quite proactive in following people and like keeping track of like tendencies and trends. And I'm always on like, you know, Instagram. I don't really use Twitter because it gives me a headache, but I go on like Twitter and other stuff to find people and seek out who did that and who was on that team, and, you know, clicking through. And we'll sometimes approach people if I think that their work has been really appropriate and could be something like cool that there could be something that we could do together. But we would approach them more in a sense of like, hey, you should pitch something to us, rather than, hey, do you want to make a film about this thing? Okay. If that makes sense. And then the final way is looking through our own back catalogue and current catalogue of Guardian journalism and discussing with the head of documentaries, you know, could this story that we've reported on be really relevant for documentaries? And if so, who would we crew that with? Can we think of any of our network, big network of filmmakers who might be really relevant for this specific idea, who might have had experience in a similar sort of topic, or especially if it's like in a different language, you know, we think, right, who's in our specifically Mexican, you know, filmmaking pool, or who's in our Italian filmmaking pool. So we have lots of kind of pools of like information and knowledge, I suppose, and we're constantly like going around and being like, hey. But when people cold pitch stuff to us, it can also lead to a commission too. So I don't want it to sound as if we only commission people we've already met or already know. If you're emerging and you contact us with a great idea, then there's no reason why that wouldn't be commissioned as much as anything else.
Now that's amazing. I think the fact that you actually go through all the applications and take the time to reply to everyone, even if it's a negative response, that's, as a filmmaker, I think we all appreciate that, because we've all been in the situation of sending and really like making a lot of effort in these applications, and sometimes never even getting a
it's
no,
awful,
thank you.
isn't it? It takes so long, it takes so much effort, and it's so long that then if somebody doesn't even reply, it just is quite painful, I think. But we also say to people, you know, you don't have to come with a perfectly polished pitch that's like taking you 10 hours. If you've got an idea that you're like, I think this is a bit of a weird one, but maybe they might be interested, you can always just email us on the side and go, hey, here's one line about a project I'm thinking about. Is it worth developing into a 1-page pitch document or something? And that can just cut out a lot of either wasted time or like a lot of questions. Like, we can do a quick email back that goes, yeah, but maybe this angle would be best. And then you're like, oh, okay. And
maybe that's better to write directly and ask before sharing the link and everyone sending you submissions that will go to
yeah. Obviously, it's good to know. Obviously, to really make a decision, you have to know stuff like the budget and stuff. But if you've got a bit of a sort of, you know, ideas have different stages, don't they? Like the sort of very initial tiny ember of an idea is very different to like the full-on like flames of an idea fire, I suppose. So if you've got an ember but you're like, I don't know, is this a waste of time? You know, we don't have endless time, so I just think it's intelligent to be like, is this good or not? And you'll usually get a response pretty quick.
Well, that's absolutely great, and I think so considerate to filmmakers. And well, my next question is something that you mentioned, I think, before, and it's like when you mentioned that some filmmakers are very interested in, okay, I want to have an Oscar or a festival circuit, or I want my film to do this and this, and this to be the journey of my film once it's released. I guess it's interesting for a lot of filmmakers to know what they might be concerned of. Okay, if I work with a Guardian or an online platform, what happens with the festival circuit, or what happens in terms of, because a lot of festivals, well, I don't know if nowadays after the pandemic, but they require you sometimes the premiere of the film, or that the film has not been released online first. So in that sense, I wanted to ask you about your experience with some of those films that have gone through a festival circuit, or how have you dealt with that in the past?
Yeah, that's a really fair question. And I think this is one of the many sort of questions, I think, that a lot of filmmakers have unanswered in their minds. There's lots of them. I think filmmaking itself is very, it's a very confusing world in a way. There's lots of different rules and different things in different places. And sometimes you can just feel a bit sort of lost and like, oh God, what happens if this and this and this? What our strategy is obviously taking from the filmmaker what they want, which is the key thing. But we do try to premiere at film festivals, and we often, we do target top tier film festivals. So we think, well, if you got a premiere at IDFA, that would be great. That would be really worth it. So, apply. And we usually have a bit of a strategy. So like at the moment, for example, I suppose this is like the inner workings of the Guardian documentary unit. At the moment, we've probably got like 4 or 5 or 6 finished films that we have ready to launch, but we're not launching them because we're waiting strategically for them to premiere somewhere, or they've sent in their applications to X, Y, and Z film festival, and we're waiting to see, well, if X and Y say yes, then which one of those do you want to premiere at? So it is a bit of a game of chess. You're kind of going, oh, okay, well, I'll place my bets on this one, but I've also got to have like my plan B and my plan C. And obviously it's an unknown. You don't know what festival programmers are looking for that year, what they might like or dislike. Films that we're like, oh my God, it's incredible. Some of them haven't been programmed in the festivals that maybe we thought they would be. And we've been like, oh, okay, well, so what about this other festival that is equally as good, but for different reasons? So I think, yeah, usually the trajectory of our films is festival circuit and then online, and the online publication will have some exclusivity to it. So it will only be on The Guardian for a while, for a certain amount of time. And then sometimes people want to share it elsewhere as well. So that's totally up to them. But yeah, festivals are important. It's just like a different facet of the same kind of sphere, isn't it? It's a different thing. It's not, for some people, they don't care about festivals. They just want people to see the film, and they just want it online. They want it to get loads of views. They want the story to be seen, and they just want eyes on it because they're passionate about the story being in the public eye. Whereas other people are much more focused on the festival circuit, and then how that might lead into like maybe some opportunities in the future for other film making stuff, or like being able to request more budget, stuff like that. So it's really dependent on who you are, what your film is, what your motivations for that specific film are, and all the rest of it. So it's very complicated, isn't it?
I guess, well, like every film, it's a whole world, and it has its own strategy. And going back to my own experience and the one we had with 𝐏𝐿𝐴, in our case, our short film was part of a bigger transmedia project. And basically it was about, and part of an impact campaign as well. So in our case, we didn't care about festivals really. And we wanted the film to go as soon as possible online, because we wanted a lot of people to get to know the story, and also to drive traffic to the interactive project, which was online. So in that sense, for us, like one of the most appealing things about The Guardian was the fact that it was an online platform, and it was digital, and that because our film wasn't like massive audiences, but it needed, the audiences were like scattered around the world. So I guess also that leads to a next question, is like, what do you see about the, for filmmakers maybe who have yet to try the digital platforms, or maybe are a bit scared of approaching digital platforms with their films, and also filmmakers that maybe are not so used to the short form? Like, what would you say, do you think are like the, I wouldn't say benefits, or like, what are the some of the strong points or things that you think are interesting about digital platforms and about short form stories for filmmakers, for documentary makers?
Yeah, so I guess, let me think. Well, at somewhere like The Guardian, you know, we have this real benefit that we have, as much as we have like marketing teams and social media teams and editorial things, we also have analysts who can analyze drop-offs on videos, like how long do people watch, what is the attention span of a viewer, just a general viewer, and having that knowledge is really good for us because it helps us understand what our offerings should be, I suppose. And obviously you can't just blanket say that like, well, everybody loves 20-minute films or everybody loves 45-minute films. It's really dependent on lots of things. For us, I think that the 20-ish, 15 to 20 to 25-minute mark works in many ways, because that is a length you could, you know, watch over a lunchtime, or you could watch on your mobile phone like sideways, and you wouldn't feel like I've been here for 2 hours, like, oh my God, I can't see it anymore. It's a manageable amount of time, but it still gives people a chance to really get into a story. And we do, in terms of video offering, not documentary, but video content at The Guardian, we do everything from 15 seconds up to, you know, what we do is the longer end of that, 45 minutes, 50 minutes maybe. So we have like different strategies for all these different lengths. Sometimes videos are like the optimum length is 3 minutes, but it's an explainer or something. Sometimes it's 12 minutes and it's what we call a news feature. So there's a presenter and it's reactive news. It's a story that's breaking like today or yesterday, or it will still be relevant tomorrow, but it won't be relevant next week or something like that. Yeah, so for us, I think 20 minutes is enough time to get deep into a story. It's enough time to fully develop your narrative arcs and your character arcs and really give people a nice offering. It gives people an opportunity to experiment a bit more visually speaking. Maybe they get to be a bit more creative with like recon or even like elements of animation or lots of different stuff that could be incorporated, and our viewers would sort of still be interested by the end, hopefully. So I think that that's why we go for that specific length. Yeah,
and speaking about length, I think there has been kind of a change throughout the years since like when you began, I guess the documentaries were shorter, right? Were like around 10 minutes maybe, because I remember when we released ours, it was one of the longest at that time, around 20, 22,
okay, yeah.
like 20. But now you have like 30,
Yeah.
sometimes a bit longer. And I don't know if that's because, and maybe, well, you should know better, is, do you think like the viewing habits of the people, of spectators online are changing? That, because what I feel is that I don't necessarily now watch a Guardian doc on my phone, but I like stream it on my from YouTube to my big TV,
Yeah.
and I watch it more a lean back experience than short video. So I don't know if you think that has changed.
Yeah, I think a lot of things have changed about how people consume video and specifically documentaries, I think, because like if you think about 10 years ago, you know, Netflix and stuff, it wasn't on everybody's TV. People were much more sort of television, I suppose, orientated, or something might appear and they are, oh, I watched that, yeah, sure. Whereas now it's a lot more proactive. People seek stuff out, don't they? We've got to breach this kind of slightly different gap with Guardian documentaries where, okay, we have like maybe people who are documentary fans who might like the work we do, and when we release a new film, we try to send out a newsletter to be like, oh, we've just released this, blah, blah, blah. So maybe they'd find out that way and watch it. We also do on our front page of our website a banner saying this is the new film that's come out. So maybe some casual viewers who are just looking on The Guardian might go, oh, I might click on that as well. But you kind of, I suppose they're people who might be more interested in the documentary format. But then you also have completely random people who like see it through Instagram, through someone else's repost or something and go, oh, okay. Or they're one of the followers on The Guardian Instagram or Twitter and happen to see it. It happens to tickle a fancy and they go, all right, oh, I want to watch that as well. So we kind of have to appeal to like people who are and people who aren't into documentaries at the same time. So yeah, and within that, there are the proactive seekers of documentary and also the very not at all active consumers of just stories. And I think like maybe a big development in just generally in terms of visual communication, I suppose, is that it's really been quite democratized in the last like 5 years. You know, most people have access to a phone that they can record some quality of image on and put videos on their own social media channels or whatever. And so the fine line between sort of creator and like, this is my documentary, and then just general visuals that are appearing in your timeline and existing in front of you is a lot finer than it once was. So I think personally that that's a good thing, but you'd be surprised how many times people watch a video or something on a Guardian, you know, one of our Guardian trailers, and then tell me about it. And I say, yeah, that was like a trailer for our documentary. And they go, oh, was that a video? Because it's kind of not gone in. It's like the information went in, but some people are a lot more aware than others of the form of the communication that they're getting, and other people kind of aren't. It's quite interesting, I think. Sometimes people can't remember, was that a photo or text or a video?
They don't even remember the format.
Kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah, well, probably. But I think, and what do you think in terms of the future for The Guardian and the future of the stories that you commission? Are you planning to stay on this like kind of format of the 20-minute kind of form, or are you also looking into perhaps in the future start testing with longer form films, or maybe series or something different, or is this like the model that you want to stick with for the time?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, because I think you should never say never, right? So you should never mark anything as like, oh no, we don't do that. I don't think that's a very helpful phrase sometimes, but at the moment we are refining our voice as a documentary strand, and it's like a long process, and it's quite a hard process to really understand your own voice in terms of, because we do take a lot of commissions with a lot of different styles. I suppose like we always try to create some sort of thread of like a subconscious sort of I wouldn't say style, but like a vibe throughout our documentaries, where it feels like it makes sense that you would see that on The Guardian, rather than, oh, this is so Guardian. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
so it's kind of
no.
a unifying thread, I suppose. But that's not to say that the films are the same. It's just that they would, as a group, you'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I think this brings me to maybe the next question, which is like, for example, the Oscar nominated, well, and winner films, which are, one is Black Sheep, which is about this Black English teenager who faces horrible racism.
Yeah.
And then you have Colette, which is about this old French woman who was part of the French resistance in World War II.
Yeah.
And they are completely different films. Like one is very like more observational, while the other is very stylish and constructed, if you want, right? Like with reenactments. Black Sheep has reenactments, and it's completely different kind of film, but at the same time, you know, they make sense as part of The Guardian. But that's kind of was one of my questions, is like, what do you think, or if you could put into words, what is that common thread between those two films, that both of them like have been so critically acclaimed, but at the same time are so different, right?
Yeah, it is. They are really different. I think there's a commonality there in giving a voice to a story that you may not have known about, but that you want to know more about because of the strength in the character. So I think in both cases, it's the same, essentially, that the unique character and the unique insight into a life experience that's not probably our own is intriguing. And that really applies to just like humans in general, I suppose, that you're intrigued by stuff you've heard about, stuff you kind of knew maybe about. You can imagine other people's experiences in certain ways, like with Black Sheep, you know, you can imagine a story of somebody experiencing racism as a teenager, but seeing this unique insight into a very unique take on that is really intriguing, and you kind of want to keep going. And I think that is the sort of holy grail, if you like, of documentary, isn't it? Finding those stories that people just get, and that they start watching something and go, oh, I really want to know more about this. And that's what we're really looking for within our pitching system, and like when we're like having chats behind the scenes with each other, you know, we're constantly talking in my team about films and about ideas for films, and remembering films we might have seen, or like remembering ideas that were from 5 months ago, being like, oh, do you remember that? I keep thinking about that and keep thinking that could have really worked if it was a bit more like this, a bit more like that. And then reaching out to those filmmakers and sort of starting up conversations again. A lot of our work is in like keeping relationships going with people and seeing how things develop, because there's the ownership of a film is the filmmakers, obviously, but we are always sort of trying to dip in and be like, oh, what happened with that? And oh, what happened with that? So I'm meeting someone today after this, actually, who pitched an idea that has evolved and changed quite a lot. And she probably pitched it 6 months ago. And initially it was a story of like two sides, and, you know, one group and then another group who are really opposing ideas, but they're kind of doing the same thing. And now it's become just one group because the other group, the story wasn't that strong in the end. So on location, it transpired that like, actually, maybe we'll sort of nod to that group, but it needs to just be about this principal group. And now we're going to have a chat later on about how that has progressed in the last couple of weeks. And she's shared like a trailer with me. So it's all about sort of going, okay, yeah, this could be good. And what about this? Have you tried that? And thought about this angle and thought about that angle. And yeah, it's a lot of sort of toing and froing, I would say.
Well, I think it's great because it's that relationship with a commissioning editor is not the usual relationship, I guess. Like, this is a very supportive, I would say, relationship that you establish with filmmakers. And actually, what I feel from speaking with you and from watching the Guardian films is that there's a real like care and interest and input for the stories since the beginning, and that you are always trying to make the film the best they can be. And like you say, I guess like what the common thread is between this like diverse set of documentaries that you have is that they have really, really strong stories or strong characters that are appealing to a global audience, that are basically universal stories, right?
Yeah. I agree. And I think that something really tangible that you feel at, obviously the Guardian offices at the moment in the UK are not as full as they once were. But when you go into the Guardian building, there's a really tangible passion for storytelling everywhere, all around you. There's people whose passion is words, there's people whose passion is photo, and then there's other visual, you know, data representation and stuff like that. And then there's video. And I think that that is really something that everybody in the Guardian who's kind of working on all their different little things is honing their skill in storytelling and recognizing the power of storytelling for both the person who the story is about, but also for the person telling the story. And I think that that's really interesting. It's definitely storytelling that we're trying to sort of do well. And those stories, obviously, they change, but yeah, that's why we often also lean into our colleagues. So writers, editors, we're constantly talking to the editors of different sections. If somebody pitches an idea about, I don't know, Russian politics, and it's not our personal forte, which, you know, why should it be? Then we would reach out to the Russian correspondent and say, hey, we've got this idea, what do you think? And so we're leaning into people to also get their take on the strength in a story and helping to refine things in that way. That's another reason we like to get on board sort of a bit earlier on, because sometimes the editors from certain regions might see nuances that we don't know about. And that's really helpful to get their opinion like early on.
I think that's great, because even if you're a really small team, like you said, 2 to 3 people, you have all these like institution and people and organization behind that you can also like tap into and consult for different films. And that's an amazing asset, I think, for a filmmaker to have that like behind. And well, I wanted to invite some people in the audience, if they want to send questions and make questions to Katia, please, you can write them down in the Q&A section. I wanted still, well, in the meantime, to ask you, I know you didn't participate directly, for example, in Black Sheep or Colette, but maybe if you could tell us a little bit about the experience. For example, how was the case in Colette? Did the Guardian was involved since the beginning of the production process, or at what stage did you become involved, and also how long did it last? Like a little bit about the experience maybe of that.
Yeah, I'm probably not, unfortunately, I'm not the best person to ask, because I was working in the video department, making films at that time, but I wasn't directly involved in the pitching or commissioning of the project. I think that the team was involved sort of midway through, and then obviously was very supportive in the run-up to the Oscars, and a couple of people, so the head of documentaries, the old head of documentaries, Charlie Phillips, and the editor of The Guardian, they went to the ceremony in Hollywood, so that's fun. But I think that the main sort of learning, or the main outcome of that whole Oscars experience for us was, I guess, prominence and being noticed and being seen. Because as much as The Guardian is this hub of amazing storytelling, and there's everyone busy and like, oh, I've got a story, I've got a deadline, at the same time, you know, that can be very hard to reach the top of. Everybody's doing amazing work and doing incredible investigations and groundbreaking stories and huge things that are sort of all over the international news and all this sort of thing. So it is hard to get noticed sometimes. And I think part of the issue for a lot of filmmakers is, as brilliant as your film may be, like, how do I get people to see this? Where do I put it? Where is the platform? Am I putting it on Vimeo, like on my personal Vimeo? Is anyone going to see it? YouTube, Facebook? I don't know. So there's all these questions that arise. And the one thing that I always think, wow, Colette had a really good impact for us in that sense, is that people suddenly are, oh, Guardian documentaries, oh, okay. And it's just a bit of a signal to be like, we're here and we're doing this, because we are quite new. So it's not anyone's fault if they don't know we exist. Part of the battle is being like, we're here. Look at what we're doing.
And I guess like positioning yourself as a documentary like brand, because I guess for some people, and not only general audience, but even filmmakers who don't know about like the work The Guardian is doing, they see The Guardian more as a news company and not necessarily as a way for creative documentaries or author films, when that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's what you, with these film festivals and prizes, you are accomplishing, to really establish the brand as something beyond like news. Because I think there's, I guess, I don't know if everyone, but some filmmakers and documentary makers make this very clear distinction between, I'm not a journalist, no, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a documentary filmmaker. And which actually, I think more and more those lines are becoming thinner, and like in general between content and like we live in a world where everything is more hybrid, and like lines are blurred and more and more. But well, I wanted, one of my last questions would be, how many documentaries do you produce per year? Because I see you have like a massive really catalog of films in only a few years. And like you say, you are a very small team. So I'm very impressed, and I would like to know approximately how many projects do you take on every year, and how long? I think you mentioned some projects could be like years, but how long is approximately the time that the production of these projects take?
Yeah, so I guess from the back end, so obviously there's like outward facing Guardian documentaries, and then there's like the inward facing Guardian documentaries where we've got all the insider info on how many films are finished, how many are in production, how many are in discussion, all of that sort of thing. The average number of films we do a year, I would say, is somewhere between like 12 and 15 or something like that. But it does vary a little bit. But that's the kind of general aim. One every month, every 3 weeks, that kind of thing. Sometimes that goes up, sometimes it goes down, you know, depending on what's going on. So generally speaking, it's about that. But the number of films that we have in production, at the moment, I know that we've got probably about like 12 in production at different stages of production. So some are in post, some are in pre-production, some are sort of scoping out stories. And I just had an email literally before this meeting saying, from someone who's supposed to be filming in December, saying, this fell through, that fell through, the other thing fell through, but we found this, we found that, we found the other, so we want to film in February. And so that pushes everything back 3 months. And, you know, you have to be, well, I think we are quite flexible in terms of, like, we want our stories to be the best they can be. So we don't try to impose crazy deadlines, unless there's something that's a specific hook that someone's working towards, like an anniversary, or it's 20 years since and it's on this specific day and they have to launch the film on that day. But usually we're a bit more flexible than that, and a bit more malleable depending on what situations arise, really. But yeah, we've usually got lots of films in production, lots of films in discussion, probably about like 50 in discussion I personally have at the moment, of like, oh, this is really interesting, and we're kind of seeing like what might happen next. And I think that number is probably a lot higher than people think sometimes. And I sort of think, sometimes I speak to filmmakers and they say, oh, but I would never, you know, I would never just email. And I just think, why not? It's just me. Like, it's not a scary person at the end of the email. It's really just a normal person who's like, oh, I'm interested in what you're saying. What are you saying? We're all curious, you know, that's why we do this job. We're all like, oh, tell me more. Oh, I want to know. Oh, we're all like nosy. So we just want to know more.
Yeah, why would you not email? Like, what other choice do you have? Like, wait for a festival and go and approach someone, and it's kind of,
I think it's fear, you know, and I totally get that, because I have felt that fear myself, and I do still to this day. You know, even if I pitched a film to my own boss, I'd be like, oh no, is it good? But you have to feel the fear and just do it anyway. I think if you're really passionate about a story, that will come across, and if there's a way of making it work, then I think that we at The Guardian, and lots of other places too who commission films, would be really willing to explore that always. So that's my sort of main thing, I think, is like, don't be afraid to just reach out to people. And they can also be like, sorry, no. And then you're like, okay. And that's part of it too, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it's part of it. It's also, as a filmmaker, you have to develop like the tolerance for rejection. That's absolutely normal, but also you have to dare, and you have to approach people with your stories, because otherwise no one will ever learn them. And I can speak from personal experience that, and also being a young emerging filmmaker, we felt with The Guardian really comfortable and also really appreciated in terms of a company that we felt the support. And I think it was a really, really good platform for us as emerging filmmakers, where when we were not getting those opportunities from more traditional broadcasters or platforms, we actually, the feedback that we used to get was like, no, this is too niche, or this is like, this story, well, it's sad, whatever, but some people will be interested, but why would I be interested in some like women in Peru or something like that? Like, okay, but I think that was something that we found extremely, extremely good as young and emerging filmmakers. I was
just going to say, that's something that really relates to what you asked earlier, which is like, what is the bonus of being online first? And that is it. Like with TV and stuff, you know, they do have to ask these questions a lot more, like, will this appeal to everybody? Whereas we're kind of doing the opposite, where like, if you want somewhere when niche is celebrated, it's the internet. It's like YouTube, isn't it? You know, you go down and everyone's like gone down a YouTube hole, and you're like, why am I watching this video? But it's led on from different, like, you know, you go down a thematic hole, like, oh, now I'm watching this weird thing. I don't know how I got here. But that happens, and that is celebrated, especially on places like YouTube. Our like key player for our website is YouTube. So that I think is also a really big bonus. And we publish things through the Guardian YouTube channel, but they are documentaries first and foremost. So, you know, they find sometimes a film gets 100,000 views overnight, and you're like, what? Why did that happen? And it's because it's found its little niche somewhere, or someone's shared it, or something's happened. And, you know, that's exactly. Quite nice.
Like traditional broadcasters or like decision makers, they will tell you, okay, this doesn't fit necessarily with my audience and what my audience likes or prefers. And that's not the case. Like the freedom that you get about finding your audience and letting your audience find you online, that's something that it's great with The Guardian, because it's not that the documentaries you produce are only for Guardian readers, right? No. Like the documentary audience is much wider than just the Guardian news readers, I would say. Is that the case?
Yeah, and actually I would argue, and this might make me sound weird, but part of the fun of, you know, launching documentaries is like trying to find those audiences and being like, ooh, how do I find people who are interested in women in Peru, and start digging around. And, you know, you can always find little niches, and I reach out to people all the time, random Instagram accounts or like random YouTube channels, and go, hey, I just thought you might like to see this film because we just launched it and it's something to do with the same thing that you seem to be interested in. So I think like the world's smaller than we sometimes think, and sometimes reaching out to people and them going, oh, cool, okay, thanks. And then posting it, and then you know, then the story is more seen. That's a really rewarding and it's quite fun thing to do. When you're like, ooh, where can I find these people? It's a challenge, you know?
Yeah, but it's a lot more, I think, rewarding, and also like, because it provides you also as a filmmaker this more direct, I guess, relationship with your audience, and also you get to learn from them, right?
Yeah.
I think we will have to start like wrapping up. But Katia, I wanted to thank you so much for your time and for sharing all these insights about the Guardian documentaries and the work you do. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I really hope that more filmmakers here in Conecta like now know about the work, know about how supportive you are, and what an amazing team to work with the Guardian documentary is. And well, that you receive really cool proposals and projects in your inbox, obviously, hopefully not
so.
200.
I'll have to share my email, so if anyone watching wants to send something in, then they can. Yeah,
I think it would be great to share your email, or maybe share the link for the pitching form that you said. I think that would be great. And I guess otherwise people can find you in the festival website as well.
Yeah, if you Google pitching documentaries, The Guardian, then that form appears.
Amazing. Well, thank you very, very much, Katia. It has been a pleasure to get to know you, and I will definitely eventually be writing to you with some ideas.
I hope so. Thank you so much. It's really nice to talk to you, and I hope that that's been insightful and interesting to somebody.
I am sure it has. It has been, I think, for me and for a lot of people, even though they are shy or it's early, and it's the first panel, so that's why I didn't participate that much. But thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you maybe around the festival.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.